Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking at the suggestions which were passed to developers in December of 2020, and as usual we're starting off with ground forces. Now another thing I do want to say is I have missed a few things from the last few months passed to developers. I will be making that up in January. We will be doing sets of videos on those vehicles, but understand it's been quite a busy few months when it comes to War Thunder. A lot of information, a lot of events, a lot of updates, a lot of new things. So unfortunately, Passed to Developers has had to take a bit of a back seat. So as usual, thank you to Coke Spray and also the team behind the Passed to Developers series, and hopefully you all have a happy new year. Hopefully you all had a lovely Christmas. So let's get into it straight away with the M2 Bradley. This is from Alpha Noodle, and he is talking about this. Now what you'll find about a lot of these articles is they're from ages ago. This one is from 2017, and it's talking about the Bradley pretty much that we already have in game. The way it's described is of course the first variant of the Bradley, armed with two TOW wide-guided AT missiles, which are second generation, so you can move them with your mouse. It also has the 25mm chain gun with the 200 RPM. It goes on to talk about, of course, the APDS, which the vehicle would use, and also the thermal sights that this was designed for. The Bradley FE was developed largely in response to the amphibious Soviet BMP family of infantry fighting vehicles. It was designed to serve as a multi-role vehicle in the form of an armored personnel carrier and also a tank destroyer or a tank killer. And one specific design requirement was that it should be as fast as the new M1 Abrams main battle tank so that they could maintain formations while moving, something which the older M113 armored personnel carriers couldn't do, as it had to be designed to complement the older M60 pattern. So this, of course, would be a new era of vehicle, and it definitely was at the end of the day. But as I said, we already have one of these variants in the game, and I believe one of the later variants was also passed earlier in the year. So it looks like they may be looking to expand the Bradley family, which would be nice to see. The next vehicle is a completely new one, and this is from Retry, and it's talking about the SpPz Luchs. Now, the SpPz Luchs is a German vehicle, and it is an 8-wheeled behemoth, a massive vehicle from the 1970s. Basically, West Germany at the time were looking to create an armored car which would replace the Walker Bulldogs that they were using at the time, and also the SpPz 11-2 Kurz in their armored reconnaissance companies. So the Luchs was going to be the replacement. It was an 8x8 all-wheeled armored car. It also was fully amphibious, which of course is very useful, especially in areas like Europe. It had a 390 horsepower engine, which propelled the 20-ton vehicle, and it had a horsepower to ton ratio of about 20 and top speeds of around 90 kilometers an hour on roads, and then 10 kilometers an hour in water, basically. The machine was also armed with a Rheinmetall Mark 20 RH202, the 20mm that we already have in game, the fast-firing one. This one had only 375 rounds stowed in it as an ammunition complement, and it did have a gun depression of 15 and an elevation of 69, so this will be able to pretty much hit everything, and with a muzzle velocity of over around about 1,000, it would be able to fire HE, APT, APDS, all of the standard rounds which this thing would have. Basically, the APT would penetrate 40mm at 1,000, and the DM63 that this could also use would pen 44mm at 1,000 meters. This is pretty good, and I don't know where you would put this thing in the game, just because it's another speedy boy which has a very rapid firing gun. The problem is it's a massive chunky machine. It's absolutely huge. The armor on it though is a bunch of RHA, which is designed to protect it against 20mm AP rounds for the 4 crew members which are in the frontal arc. It also has access to 4 76mm smoke launchers on each side of the turret, so therefore it would be able to, survive, it would be able to reposition, let's say, in game and survive initial hits. Overall, it's an interesting vehicle. It's once again another massive vehicle with not a lot of firepower, but at the end of the day, it would be quite interesting to see. The next one is from Retry, and Retry is actually not talking about a vehicle itself, but a gun system, which could be mounted on a ton of different vehicles. This gun system is the ZSU-23-2, and it's basically what you see before you. It's a 1950s designed anti-aircraft gun. It was designed to replace the 14.5mm, which you will be very, very, you'll know a lot in game, the KPVTs, and the ZSU-23-2 was based heavily on the ZPU-2 mount and can be considered as basically an upgunned mount. And each of the two 2A14 cannons has a cyclic rate of fire of 1,000 rounds per minute. This means that overall, this mount can fire at 2,000 rounds per minute. The guns are fed by 50-round clips, which gives the weapon system 3 seconds of fire before having to reload, and the weapon system was widespread, and it was used by a lot of people. The one that Retry does talk about adding to the game, though, would be a version like this, which is mounted on a truck. I believe also there was a version of the BTR, which had access to the 23mm as well, so we could definitely have a look at that machine. But yeah, this would be a vehicle which would be able to sit between the ZSU-37 and the ZSU-57-2, and as we've talked about many times, the Soviets have a massive gap in AA between the ZSU-37 and the ZSU-57-2. To help you understand how long that gap has existed, this is a post from the 17th of July 2016. That's how old this post is. So we are now on 4.5 years for that BR gap to exist, and it definitely needs filling with something. The next vehicle is the Brits, and it is from Duck Martin, and what Duck Martin is talking about is a big huffer. This thing is, of course, a massive machine, and what it ends up being is another howitzer, the self-propelled howitzer, or SpPz, the AS-90. Yes, Britain used a very similar vehicle to pretty much everybody else at the time as well. The AS-90, it's a self-propelled howitzer. It evolved from the international SpPz program. The SpPz program was actually cancelled in the late 1980s, basically because of funding issues. So Britain had to find a new way of, creating SpPzs. And the AS-90 artillery system was developed by Vickers, and it entered service with the British Army in 1993. The production of it was completed in 1995. They made 179 of them, and it replaced the FV433 Abbott and also the US M109, which the British were using at the time. This thing is very standard compared to a lot of the other artillery pieces that NATO forces use. It has access to the 155mm L39 howitzer, and it is able to fire all of the rounds that NATO 155mm fire. It can fire any standard NATO 155 ammunition. It also has a maximum range of 24.7 kilometers with its standard HE frag projectiles, and then 32 kilometers with its rocket assisted projectiles, and it can carry a total of 48 rounds. And what's interesting about it is it does have, let's call it, a quick firing mode. It can fire 3 rounds in 10 seconds, then it has a maximum fire rate of 6 rounds per minute and a sustained fire rate of 2 rounds per minute. So obviously, if you're not, if you're not firing at that 3 rounds in 10 seconds, you are definitely missing out. It also has a secondary armament, it's a 7.62, it's not going to be doing too much, and also it has a 12.7 if required on the vehicle itself. It does have smoke grenade discharges and also a smoke generator on it, and it has around about 17 millimeters of armor, which is designed to protect it from 14.5 millimeter armor piercing rounds, and all protection against 7.62 millimeter armor-piercing rounds. It also has an NBC protection system, automatic fire suppression systems, all the good stuff that we have on these modern SpHs. It also has a Cummins VTA 903 turbocharged diesel engine. This thing gives it 660 horsepower. And also, it can generally be a little bit nippy around the place and producing a lot of power for this general machine. Because of the weight, though, the weight is quite heavy on this machine at 45 tons. It does take a little bit to push it around. The elevation of the gun is 70 degrees with a gun depression of only 5. So, yeah, definitely one of those interesting vehicles. Overall, it would be a derp gun at high tiers, unless they added in artillery systems, and at least in my opinion, I hope they don't. The next one is from Nameless, and Nameless is talking about the Type 74. Now, the Type 74 we have in-game in many versions, but we do not have this one technically. So, Nameless is trying to solve an age-old problem when it comes to the game, and it's a good problem to solve, and it's one that I admire. One of the main issues when it comes to premiums in the game is a lot of them do not have tech tree equivalents. So, in the form of the Japanese have the Type 74 Kai, which is in the game, or the Type 74 Mod G Kai, whatever you want to call it, and it's basically just a Type 74 with access to a thermal sight. Everything else about the vehicle is very similar compared to the standard tech tree vehicles. This means that it does have a better advantage over its general 8.7 vehicles of the Type 74, and therefore doesn't have a standard tech tree equivalent of the vehicle. What Nameless wants to do is he wants to split the same tank into two different tanks in the game, and do this through slight physical differences. So you have the Type 74 Kai, which would be the premium version, and then you have the Type 74 Mod G. These are technically the same two vehicles, but the Type 74 Kai would have access to side skirts, whereas the Type 74 Mod G, which would be in the tech tree, would not. This would mean that the Japanese would get a standard tech tree vehicle in the form of the Type 74 with access to thermal sights, but not access to the side skirts. So this would give them a tech tree equivalent to the premium. And generally, I think this is a good idea. If you want to buy the premium, you get the premium bonuses. It's also a vehicle that's been around for a long time. It's also a vehicle that struggles when it comes to a lineup. So why not stick in another vehicle in the tech tree which is very close to it to be able to play alongside it. Very similar to what they've done with the Leopard 1A5s recently, and the A1A1L44, and also the OF40 MTCAs. I generally think this is a cool idea, and would be nice to see, and wouldn't actually cost too much to be able to stick it in the tech tree, since even in the asset viewer you're able to just remove the side skirts, and there you go. It's a different vehicle. Voila, as they say. So the next vehicle that is on offer is from Sweep Down, and what Sweep Down is offering is something that is also desperately needed. That's right, it's a Chinese SpAAG. This is the PGZ-95, or the Type 95 SPG, or SpAAG as it's known, and basically this vehicle is very similar to how the Saddam would work in game, more similar to the Saddam Mistral than anything else. Basically, in the 1980s, the PLA wanted an SpAAG. They wanted it to be equivalent to the ZSU-23-4 M4 Shilka, which of course the USSR used at the time, and the program would have likely benefited from the fact that they bought a Saddam turret in the mid-1980s, and obviously it has a very, very similar weapon system to it. So what they decided to do is create a weapon system which had a quad mount of Type 87 25mm cannons and also would have access to AA missiles. These AA missiles are known as the QW2s. They are infrared homing missiles, and their closest equivalent would be to the Igla-1, which of course the Soviets used, the 9K310s that are already in the game. I believe only on helicopters though. Then the chassis was also used for the PTZ-89, which we just got in game. So it's the same chassis as this thing. So therefore, you know, it's closer than ever before. We will get a high tier, you know, Chinese SpAA. The 25mm cannons use the same as the 25mm armed variants of the WZ-551 APC. They can fire at a RPM of 600 to 800. So that means the total rate of fire of this machine is 2,400 to 3,200 rounds. It has a total ammunition loadout of 1,000 rounds or 250 per gun. And the turret also features stuff like a TV camera with a 6-kilometer range. It has an infrared tracking camera for night use with a 5-kilometer range, a laser rangefinder with a range of 0.5 to 5.5 kilometers, and also has a CLC-1 S-band pulse Doppler radar with a reported range of 11 kilometers and optimized to shoot low-flying planes as they come in. It's also armored enough to withstand small arms fire and shrapnel, but doesn't have a ton of protection on the general machine itself. Basically, this is a machine that would be lovely to see. You know, it's one of those which, which China doesn't have right now. Every other nation in the game has at least one radar SpAA, and unfortunately China is the one that is left out. So this would be a lovely addition to be able to bridge that gap for the Chinese, and we've seen a lot of bridging of gaps for the Chinese this year. You know, the ZTZ-99, the ZTZ-96s, the PTZ-89, the CM-25, you know, there's been a lot of stuff for China at top tier. Why not have this at the start of next year too? Now, the next vehicle is from Nicholas Konku, and it's talking about a special OF-40. The special OF-40 has access to the Thetis thermal sights, that's THETIS thermal sights, and also MVDs, along with a little bit of extra armor on the turret, but that is unknown. And basically, what the Italian government wanted was to evaluate if adding the system, the Thetis system, on a Leopard 1 or an OF-40 would be beneficial in the long run. This never came to be, and it was never put into service as a possible upgrade because there were other upgrades that were planned for both MBTs, which were seen as better. The zoom of the Thetis sight is also debated. It's either ×4 and ×12, or it is ×2 to ×4. But this thing has quite an interesting little story behind it. It wasn't just a one-off prototype. There were at least 2 of these which were made, and one of them was actually part of a show. The show being Scuola di Polizia, which is a police school. This was, at least when it was used, from 2006 to 2008. The show was basically a way in which the members of the Italian military police would demonstrate driving and how they conduct raids. There is a part in the act where there would be several bad guys lifting off from a helicopter, and this is when the OF-40 would drive towards the building and shoot its cannon at the helicopter and blow it up. But unfortunately, after 2008, it wasn't used in this show again, and it went back to the Otto Melara factory. There is one which is still sat there, restored and outside on display, but there is believed to be another one which was just sat on the inside, and it's awaiting restoration. So at the end of the day, even though this thing has a really cool story, it is basically just an now a 40 with access to a thermal sight. That is in the game, that's what it would be. Everything else would be the same on it, has the same 105mm, has the same smoke grenade, same engine, all of this stuff. I don't think it is the MTCA version with the upgraded engine. It would just be the slightly, better version with access to the thermals. Then we have something from France, from Way of the Woke, and this vehicle is one that I would be really happy to see in the game. So this is an M47, but not just a standard M47. This one has access to the 105mm that you find on the AMX-30. And basically what happened is in 1967, the French army were looking for a modernization program for their M47s to keep them basically in accordance with the times. So there was a single prototype that was made. It modified a M47 and fitted it with the rifled CN105 105mm from the AMX-30 and also an ammo capacity of 71 rounds. The way to give it this ammo capacity was they removed the machine gunner position basically, and also the machine gun in the hull, and that is where you added the extra rounds, and also they put some extra armor plating over the MG port so it wasn't easily hit. They did do firing tests on this and also with the L7, but the rapid introduction of the AMX-30 basically made the program useless. They just decided to put all their eggs into one basket with the AMX-30. There was also visual modifications from the 1967 Satiri exhibition, also revealed it had an IR spotlight fitted to the turret, although it is unknown as to which type it is. So this basically would be, at the end of the day, an M47 which had access to the French gun, the 105mm CN105F1. And as a person who really likes the French gun and really likes the AMX-30 platform, I think this would be kind of an interesting machine. It also supposedly has a coaxial mount of the 7.62 still there. I can't see it in any of the pictures. Well, I suppose there is one here which does kind of show it, and also the 50 cal, which is also not present in any of the pictures, but I'm sure it could easily be put onto the pintle mount which exists on the turret. So yeah, it's a pretty cool little vehicle. It will be very similar to how the Italians have the M47 but with the L7-105. I think generally these M47 projects are really cool, and the fact that they were tested and fully made definitely means that they deserve a place in the game. The next one is from Wise Minerva, and Wise Minerva is talking about a pretty cool little vehicle too. This is the Panzerbill M39 and also M40 Lynx, and this vehicle starts off not as a Swedish vehicle, even though it does have the flag on it, as you can see. Starts off kind of as a Danish vehicle. Initially, the Danish government ordered the M39 into production in 1938 through Landsverk, which you may have heard before. You know, we've talked about Landsverk quite a lot because of the fact that, you know, they produced a lot of the Swedish vehicles that we have in the game. When Denmark was invaded on the 9th of April 1940, though, Sweden cancelled the order after only 3 vehicles were delivered, and the remaining 15 were kept by the Swedish military despite repeated requests to have the order completed. The ones which went to the Danish military were armed with Madsen 20mm autocannons and also 3 Madsen KSB M39 machine guns, which were the 8mm ones that you will be used to in the game, in the hull and also the turret. It had access to a 140 horsepower Scania Vabis petrol engine, and when the order was placed for a further 30 vehicles, Landsverk was unable to fulfill it and ended up giving the license to Volvo in 1940, who made a new version specifically for the Swedes. This version would be the M40. It replaced the Madsen 20mm with a 20mm Maskin cannon, the M40S with a 28 round magazine, and due to being a Volvo vehicle, the engine was replaced by one of their designs, specifically basically the Volvo inline 6-cylinder water-cooled overhead valve engine. It had 460 cu or cubic inches, and then 135 horsepower. It was similar in weight and appearance to the original, but obviously had different internals. Both of the vehicles, or at least the Swedish vehicle, never saw action under the Swedish military because obviously they stayed neutral, technically. And the 3 Danish Lynx cars, which were sent over, were actually used by the invading forces, so Germany, for policing duties. And later 13 were sold to the Dominican Republic, where they remained in service until 1958. So they could definitely add these vehicles into War Thunder, maybe even a premium one in the form of the Danish one, and then have a standard tech tree one for the Swedish. It's a pretty nice vehicle, you know. It's a four-wheeled, very long setup vehicle with a 20mm. Would be a pretty fun rank 1 in my opinion. The autocannon 20mm are always a lot of fun while wandering about, so it would be lovely to see this beautiful vehicle. But that is all we have for you when it comes to suggestions passed to the developers for ground forces. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Elove Goat, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez B. Young, and also Hans Fagellen, Sebastian Mizon, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.